So hello everybody, we're delighted to have a guest speaker here this morning. It was really helpful. He's come to the school many times over the years. It's Dermot Crosby, and he's the Employer Relations Facilitator with the Department of Social Welfare, and he's fantastic knowledge around grants and support systems and particularly the financial side of working and keeping disability or other allowances. So we'll give a round of applause to
Thank you very much, Aidan, and good morning everybody. Thank you indeed for the invitation here today. As Aidan said, my name is Dermot Crosby. I work with the Employer Relations Unit at the Department of Social Protection, and what I'd like to do today is just give you an overview of some of the supports and services that are available to, I suppose, job seekers with disabilities from the Department of Social Protection. So the first item that I want to cover today is disability allowance and the DA earnings disregard. Okay? DA obviously being disability allowance. Disability allowance is a very flexible social welfare payment. People with a disability can apply for disability allowance at age 16. But when someone leaves school and they decide to take up training, disability allowance is very flexible because they can attend, let's say, an ETB, an Education Training Board funded program, and depending on the college or the training centre, their disability allowance may go on hold, and while they're attending the training course, they then receive a training allowance. Okay. Now I'm being very particular about my wording here because their disability allowance just goes on hold. It's not cancelled, it's not terminated, it just goes on hold. And for the duration then of the training course, they'll receive a training allowance. At the end of the training course, their training allowance will end and their disability allowance will kick back in again automatically. And there is never any fear around their disability allowance. They will always get their disability allowance back again. So I suppose one of my intentions today was just to give you some reassurance around that. There's always a lot of fear around giving up disability allowance, but if you take up a training course or indeed work that I'm going to talk about in just a moment, you're not giving up your DA as such, it's just going on hold. Okay, so if somebody decides to take up part-time work, again the disability allowance earnings disregard comes into effect, and right now you can earn €165 per week and retain all your disability allowance. Your DA isn't reduced at all. It's only when you exceed 165 per week. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. So we're going to keep it simple enough. If somebody earns 265 per week, the first 165 is disregarded, and then that person is €100 over the limit, so to speak. Half of 100 is 50. So the person's DA is reduced by €50 approximately. Now I'm saying approximately because if the person is paying PRSI, that's taken into consideration. So €50 per week is just a guide. And right now the disability allowance is €232 per week. So if somebody is earning 265, their DA is reduced by €50. So that 232 comes down to 227. I need to work that out in my head. Just
182.
182. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. I worked it out before I came up, and just on the spot there, it didn't come to me. So if somebody's earning 232 on disability allowance and their DA is reduced by €50, it's reduced down to 182. Okay. Now that formula is used all the way up to 375. So again, if somebody's earning 375, the first 165 is disregarded and they're 210 over the limit. Half of 210 is 105, so that 232 is reduced by 105. Okay, so that brings it down to 127. Okay, and again that formula is used up to 375. If somebody earns over 375, then the DA is reduced €1 for every euro earned over 375. So effectively, somebody could earn, close to €500 per week and still retain a very small portion of their disability allowance. Okay, so that's the disability allowance earnings disregard. I've got some handouts here for today for everybody in the audience, and I can also email them on so that they can be emailed on to anybody who's listening online and for future reference as well. Okay.
Can I just ask you a question?
You certainly can.
With the training allowance, if they go into a training centre, say like Mayfield Training Centre, they get their training allowance and their
Yes.
disability would be just on hold.
Yes.
Is the training allowance the same as, does it equal the same?
It is.
As a
It's
disability?
exactly the same.
Okay.
So that's a very good question. Right now, the disability allowance is $232 per week, and if somebody takes up a training course, the training allowance is exactly the same as $232, and the disability allowance goes on hold. Now, a person may be eligible for travel to the training centre, and they may also, depending on how far they're travelling, they may be entitled to an accommodation allowance. So it all depends on the distance and where the person is living.
How do they know about the accommodation allowance? Where do they get that?
That's all explained on day one when the person starts the training course.
Okay.
So on day one, depending on how far they're travelling to the training course, they may be eligible for a travel allowance or an accommodation allowance. Right now the accommodation allowance is €69.90, and there's also travel as well. So it depends on what you're entitled to, what you're eligible for, but it's all explained on day one.
So,
Yes,
can you
ma'am.
explain what training courses are covered, Dermot? Because this is not, we'll say,
Yes.
it's not disability courses.
Okay. So for example, I mentioned ETB funded
Yes.
courses there.
Yes.
And in Cork and around the country, you would have ETB
Yes.
training centres.
Yes.
Okay.
Like Mayfield and Blackpool.
Like Mayfield and Blackpool, they're aimed at early school leavers essentially.
Yes.
You've also got the training centre in Bishopstown. Now they're a little different from St John's College, College of Commerce, and Colossus Stefan Neva, to use the older names. But if somebody starts a course in one of their training centres, they're ETB funded, and when you start a course there, your disability allowance goes on hold.
Can I ask, does everybody starting that course get the training allowance, or is it only people who have the disability allowance previously? 'Cause
Okay.
not all of our students, unfortunately, get the disability allowance.
Okay, again, it's a very good question because it applies to people in receipt of disability allowance and also job seekers allowance and job seekers benefit. So if you start a course on either of those three payments, disability allowance, job seekers allowance, or job seekers benefit, your social welfare payment will go on hold, and you receive a training allowance. And then at the end of the training course, your disability allowance will automatically kick back in.
But somebody who's a school leaver, who leaves here, who doesn't have a disability allowance and goes to Mayfield Training Centre, wouldn't qualify for that training allowance.
If they're not in receipt of social welfare.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if they're under 18, okay, they will qualify for a training allowance.
Okay.
Okay, under that program, if they're under the age of 18.
Right.
Okay.
If they're not,
If they're not, in order to receive a training allowance,
Yeah.
you must be in receipt of a social welfare payment
Okay.
on commencement of the training course. Now, there's a distinction between the other ETB funded colleges like St John's College, Colossus Stefan Neva, and St John's College here in Cork. If you're doing a course in their training colleges, there's other options like VTOS, the Vocational Training Opportunity Scheme, and there's also the Back to Education allowance as well.
And the
Big-
sushi.
And there's sushi, exactly, because there's fees associated with their courses. So what a person can do is either apply for Back to Education, VTOS, or indeed apply for SUSI.
Yeah, sushi.
Yeah,
So that's for the Cork FET colleges.
that's it. That's the
They're a
further-
different
Yes.
brand really to the
It's just exactly.
Training
Again, they're
centres.
funded by the ETB, but as you say, Coleman, they're the further education training colleges there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, on to the next item?
Yeah. that's
Okay.
great.
The other item I just want to cover again, I just covered actually on the disability allowance. I want to cover community employment schemes. Again, I think it's a very good option for somebody who has left school, maybe they've just left a training course, and now they want to gain some work experience. Now there's CE schemes or community employment schemes all over the country, every city, every county in Ireland. And a community employment scheme is a really good way of putting some work experience and training on your CV, okay? Not everyone is eligible. You must be in receipt of a social welfare payment, but if you're in receipt of disability allowance, you're eligible immediately. And if you haven't completed a CE scheme previously, you're definitely eligible immediately, okay? So when you start a community employment scheme, it's 19.5 hours per week. You will automatically get a 12-month contract, and if you're involved in a training program while you're doing the CE scheme, it can extend for 3 years and maybe 4 years, depending on the scheme. It's an excellent way, as I said, to get some work experience on your CV, but also to get somebody in the routine of work. And it's not the open labour market as such; it's more of a supportive working environment. But it can really help and prepare some person who's maybe a little distant from the labour market, or who's been unemployed for a while, just to get ready for the open labour market and prepare them for work. All over the country, you've got community employment schemes in local community centres, sports centres, GAA clubs. They're basically not-for-profit organisations, but again, it's something that I would recommend and highlight to a lot of people as well, just to help put that work experience on the CVs. Just in regards to the disability allowance, on day one, again, your DA goes on hold, and specifically it goes on hold, it's not cancelled or terminated, and for the duration of the CE scheme, you receive a community employment allowance. And at the end of your CE scheme, whether that's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, your disability allowance will automatically kick back in again. And there's no fear around that. And again, just to give people reassurance around that, when your DA goes on hold, there is no fear at the end, it will automatically kick back in again at the end.
And is that allowance also the same?
The community employment allowance, as we speak today, is €259.50.
Okay.
So that's the top up onto the 232, which is the standard disability allowance payment. And just as a point of information, all the social welfare payments are the same, whether it's job seekers allowance, job seekers benefit, disability allowance, illness benefit, it's 232 per week. Now in some cases there might be a reduced payment, but the full single rate payment is 232 per week.
Right. And are you expected to work the 19.5 hours?
You are indeed, yes. Yeah, but you know, during the good thing about the community employment scheme, in fact, is that while you're on the scheme, if you wanted to take up another part-time job, because you're on a community employment allowance, you're no longer in receipt of your DA. So you can go out and work as many hours as you can, and it doesn't affect your community employment allowance of $259.50. So, as I mentioned already, the community employment is 19.5 hours per week. If you've got a part-time job at the weekend or the weekends, that's perfectly fine. Good for you, it's extra money for you.
And would that then have the disregard and stuff going on as well?
No, it doesn't have the disregard. The disregard doesn't come into play because the DA disregard only comes into play when you're in receipt of disability allowance.
Okay.
So while you're on the community employment scheme, your DA is on hold and you receive the community employment allowance.
Excellent.
Okay.
And could you give an example of CE schemes around? I know childcare would be a big one that I'd have people
Yeah.
who are interested in.
Childcare is a big one.
Yeah.
And the good thing about the childcare is that, you know, if you wanted to achieve your level 5 in childcare, you could use the childcare community employment scheme to gain the work experience, and then also gain the certification as well over that 2 or 3 year period. So
Yeah.
childcare is ideal. Also healthcare is ideal,
Okay.
because if you want to work in healthcare, you must have the level 5 healthcare assistant qualification. So you could use the community employment healthcare CE scheme to gain the work experience, and also do the level 5 while you're doing the work experience on the CE scheme. Also, I mentioned all the various sports centres. A lot of the GA clubs would have caretakers, grounds people working in CE roles. You'd have all the various charity shops. You'd have organisations like the Threshold and so on, Meals on Wheels, basically community organisations.
Is there any age restrictions or requirements for CE schemes?
Okay, for people in receipt of DA, you qualify at age 18 for community employment. In a lot of CE schemes, you must be 21. And again, with childcare and healthcare, just to mention, there's Garda vetting involved there as well. Any place where you're involved in the care of vulnerable adults or vulnerable people or young children and so on, there's also Garda vetting.
In the case where somebody's not on DA and they have to go into social welfare prior to starting a CE scheme,
Yes.
is there like a 6-month waiting gap there? Because I've heard of people falling through where
Okay.
they're not unemployed long enough.
Yes, it's actually 12 months. So if you're not in receipt of a disability payment, you must be 12 months in receipt of a job seeker's payment to qualify for community employment, to be eligible. Whereas if you're in receipt of disability allowance, you qualify immediately. If you're in receipt of invalidity pension, so another disability payment, you qualify immediately. If you're in receipt of illness benefit, you qualify after 6 months. Okay. So just while I'm touching on community employment, I just want to mention the Work Placement Experience Programme, the WPEP. Okay. Now again, this is another really good way for someone to put some work experience on their CV. This is a scheme that is zero cost to an employer if they're in a position to provide 6 months work experience to a job seeker who could, for 30 hours per week. Okay. Now, regardless, this is open to everyone in receipt of disability allowance, somebody in receipt of job seekers allowance, one-parent family, blind pension, and so on. If you're in receipt of disability allowance, blind pension, you're eligible immediately. If you're in receipt of job seekers, you must be in receipt of your payment for 6 months. Okay, and the payment while you're on the Work Placement Experience Programme is $335 per week. So as I mentioned earlier, your standard job seekers payment or your disability allowance is $232 per week. If you go onto a Work Placement Experience Programme, you receive $335 per week from the Department of Social Protection.
Instead of the 232.
Instead of the 232, yes. And
so is your DA put on hold again? Are you using the same terminology?
it is basically you receive a top up each week.
Okay.
You receive a top up. The other thing to say in regards to WPEP is that there's 2 ways to go about it. All the vacancies are advertised on the Jobs Ireland website. So if you're looking for community employment vacancies, they're advertised on Jobs Ireland. If you're looking for WPEP vacancies, again they're advertised on Jobs Ireland. And if you see a vacancy, that's great, you can apply for it straight away. But if you wanted to get into a particular company or a hotel or a particular industry, you could actually go around knocking on employers' doors to make the employer aware of the WPEP. And the employer may not be aware of it. And at that point then, if the employer is willing to take you on, it's zero cost. Now the employer also must provide the work experience and provide some mentoring, but there's no financial cost, and the Department of Social Protection will pay the job seeker $335 per week for 6 months. And the employer at the end isn't obliged to take the person on. They're not obliged, but we hope they will. And we say that from the beginning, but if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and that's just sometimes the reality of the situation. Sometimes maybe the person doing the work experience might get a job someplace else, and that's fine too. But in 6 months' time, if things work out, there are 2 options. The first option would be Jobs Plus, and this is a grant of either €7,500 or €10,000 that's available to an employer to help them employ somebody who's been unemployed and in receipt of a social welfare payment. And what determines the €7,500 or the €10,000 is the age of the person, and how long they've been in receipt of a social welfare payment. If they're coming from a marginalised group, for example, if they're an ex-offender, if they're from the addiction services, if they're a refugee from the Roma community, the employer will immediately qualify for a €10,000 grant, and that's paid to the employer over a 2-year period. So that's €416 per month, which is a tax-free payment to the employer. If the employer qualifies for €7,500, then the payment is $312 per month, and again that's a tax-free payment that's paid to the employer over a 2-year period. Now, what both employer and employee need to do is register with jobsplus.ie. So you go to jobsplus.ie, and if you're a job seeker, you put in your PPS number, and you'll get confirmation in writing that you're eligible for Jobs Plus, and either €7,500 or €10,000. The employer also needs to register with Jobs Plus, and basically they need to put in their tax details, and they need to show that they're tax compliant. But the employer then, if at interview stage, they can ask their interviewee, by the way, do you know if you're eligible for Jobs Plus? Rather than asking the person, are you in receipt of social welfare? That might be a little bit too sensitive. They can ask the interviewee, are you eligible for Jobs Plus? So they can check that out and confirm that by going to jobsplus.ie. Okay. And after that, once the job seeker gets the confirmation in writing, they can give that to the employer, and the employer then can put those details into Jobs Plus, and the Jobs Plus team take over from there. Okay, that's the first option, Jobs Plus. If the person is a person with a disability, they may qualify for the wage subsidy scheme, the WSS. And the WSS is a subsidy that's paid to an employer. It's €6.30 per week, and it's there to help the employer employ a job seeker with a disability. So just to give you a very simple example, at the moment the minimum wage is €12.70. Our subsidy is €6.30 per hour. Yes, it's €12.70 per hour minimum wage, and if somebody is employed through the wage subsidy scheme, we pay €6.30 per hour. So if the employer is paying €12.70, we pay €6.30. So the shortfall then is €6.40, and that's the cost to the employer. I'm delighted to say that just recently, on the 1st of April 2024, the minimum number of hours for the wage subsidy scheme is 15. Now, a person can work up to 39 hours per week on WSS, and we have everybody on the scheme employed anywhere between 15 and 39 working full time. So recently it was reduced from 21 down to 15. And if somebody wants to work 15 hours a week, they can certainly do that, and the employer can benefit then by €6.30 per hour. One of the bonuses, yes, go on.
Who qualifies for that?
This payment is paid directly to the employer.
But what type of employees qualify?
Okay, so you must have a disability.
Yes.
Okay, and that disability must, I suppose, impede your productivity. So somebody might have a learning difficulty, and as a result, it may take them a little bit longer to complete tasks. They may require an extra bit of supervision. Somebody might have mental health issues, and the way I explain this is they might have good days and bad days, and the WSS is there to make good any perceived productivity shortfall on the bad days. So we try to use the most sensitive language around this. Somebody might have autism or Asperger's, and again, depending on the disability, the WSS is paid to make good any perceived productivity shortfall. There are people with disabilities that won't qualify for the WSS because during their working day they don't have a productivity shortfall. So at stage one, the employer, the employee, and somebody from the Department of Social Protection from the Intrio office will sit down and have a discussion around this. And if there's a productivity shortfall, then an application can be submitted for the wage subsidy scheme. If there's no productivity shortfall, then they won't qualify. A disability could be that may not qualify as diabetes, for example, because a person may be, it is a disability, but they may be injecting themselves and working perfectly fine Monday to Friday without any productivity shortfall because their disability is managed through their injections of insulin. Somebody might have epilepsy, but it could be very well controlled epilepsy, and they may not suffer from seizures.
So do you need a medical report?
If it's a good question, Coleman. If somebody isn't in receipt of a disability payment, they require a medical report. So if somebody comes in on one parent family, or somebody comes in on job seekers allowance, that's a non-disability payment, so then a medical report is required. But if somebody is in receipt of disability allowance or invalidity pension, a medical report is not required at that point. So again, just another point in regard to the WSS, if an employer employs 3 people on the scheme, they then qualify for a 10% bonus. So that €6.30 increases to €6.93 per hour. And that increases as you employ more people through the WSS. And again, they can be part-time or they can be full-time. We would have some very inclusive employers in Cork. And I'll just give one example. It could be in the retail industry. An employer may have 3 shops, for example. And why it might be difficult to have 3 people in one shop, it's much easier to have 1 person per shop. And in that instance, because they employ 3 people on the WSS, they qualify then for a 10% bonus. And that €6.30 per hour increases to €6.93 per hour. And that's a tax-free subsidy to an employer. The strand 2 payment, the bonus payment, can increase all the way to 50%. So if somebody employs 23 people in WSS, and we do have a few big employers around the country, and they would have 23 people plus employed through WSS. They're very inclusive employers, and as a result they qualify for a 50% bonus. So that €6.30 per hour increases to €9.45 per hour. So again, that's a very decent subsidy per hour towards an employee's salary. Okay.
And you said like the minimum wage, I presume they don't have to pay the minimum wage, they can pay above the minimum wage.
Absolutely. So anybody that's employed these days, regardless of the WSS, everybody must be in receipt of at least the minimum wage.
Yes.
But in regards to the WSS, they must be paid the going rate for the job. So we have people in management on the WSS who are recovering from illness or have maybe acquired a disability, and there's a productivity shortfall. So we've got people on WSS working in catering, working in management at all different levels. Disability affects everyone. It can land on anybody's doorstep. And so with the WSS, as I say, it's right across the board, right from kitchen porter, waiters, retail assistants, right up to management. And the person must be paid the going rate for the job. So if we've got an accountant on this job, on this wage subsidy scheme, so the accountant is being paid the going rate for his job.
And can I ask, Dermot, you came to the WSS through the work placement?
It can do, yes.
Do you have to go through the work placement?
No, not at all.
You can
Not
apply
at all.
directly, the employer.
Absolutely. But I suppose I mentioned the WPEP, the Work Placement Experience Programme, just as one of the progression routes.
Yes. Okay.
But somebody can be in a community employment scheme. They can leave the scheme. They can then move on to employment in the open labour market, and they can avail of WSS. Now, the WSS is only available to the private sector. Okay, so employers like the HSE, civil service, public sector, they're not eligible for the WSS. And the majority of our applications would come in through the job coach service, and that would be through the employability service. Okay, so it's a service that's available to anybody with a disability, any job seeker with a disability, because the person must be job ready. So if somebody calls into the local intro office, they're job ready, they're looking for work, they can be referred to the local employability service, whether they're in Dublin, Donegal or Cork. And the WSS is just one of the tools, one of the employment support tools that a job coach can use to help a job seeker with a disability secure employment.
But for example, I think we talked about this the last time, we wouldn't be eligible to employ somebody on the WSS in this school, but we could take somebody on the work placement experience program.
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
Yes, you could. The work placement, and I'm delighted you highlighted that, Colin. The work placement experience program is available to everyone,
Yes.
public sector, private sector. But the WSS specifically is private sector. Okay. So I'll just move on to one other item, and I just want to highlight Jobs Ireland, because this is where you're going to find all the information on community employment schemes, work placement experience program, and also, I suppose, Jobs Ireland is a free service to employers and also to job seekers. So if an employer wants to advertise a job, they can advertise it free of charge on Jobs Ireland, and the job is out there then for job seekers to view and actually apply for. Job seekers can upload their CVs onto the Jobs Ireland website, and there's software on the Jobs Ireland website that automatically job matches the CVs and the job seekers against jobs that are being advertised on the website.
What about apprenticeships? Would they be advertised?
Yes, they can also be advertised on jobsireland.ie, and I suppose specifically in regard to apprenticeships, apprenticeships can be advertised at apprentices.ie.
Apprentices, yeah. No,
But-
that's in Cork though.
So, but I suppose at the moment the whole area is booming, and right now it's an opportunity for me to mention Construction Week, which is taking place next week all over the country, from the 15th to the 19th of April. And there's construction events taking place all over Ireland. In Cork next week, the 18th of April, we've got a construction event taking place in Cork City Hall. We expect to have up to 50 employers there, and basically all the job seekers can come through, talk to the employers if you're interested in apprenticeships or generally working in construction. The employers will be there to talk to, and there'll also be some trainers there as well that provide courses in construction. So yes, again, just with Jobs Ireland, all the construction jobs are advertised there, and it's a free service to employers. All the community employment schemes are advertised there, and the WPEP vacancies as well. Okay. Are there any questions on that, I wonder?
I have two questions that are kind of more generic, I suppose, really,
Okay.
comments.
Yeah.
The first one is, like, there's a kind of a haves and a have-not community here.
Right.
It really comes down to whether you get your disability allowance or not.
Okay.
Like, if you don't get the disability allowance, you're kind of in no man's land.
Yes.
And some of our students, unfortunately, don't get the disability allowance. So
Okay.
I had a parent walked in this morning looking for a letter. She's applying for disability allowance for a child in this class, and she wants the letter to say the child is attending this school, and also some other information about her difficulties. So obviously she has been told by DSB that that's what she requires.
Yeah.
And I've done that for quite a number of parents stroke students over the last number of years.
Yes.
So that's one challenge. And the other challenge that I would be conscious of really is, I don't know what you think, Aidan or Enda, but for some of our students where they have good advocacy at home, they'll be fine. But some of our students don't have necessarily good advocacy within their family and may need additional support. Does the department provide any advocate service, like for somebody who's just kind of doing this maybe by themselves?
Just there's two questions there, Colin. Just the first question in regard to disability allowance. I would always recommend that if somebody is turned down for a disability allowance when they apply for the first time, always appeal. And a person has 21 days to appeal. Always appeal. Okay. And in your appeal, if you can submit additional information in regard to your disability, as you mentioned, a letter from the school, whatever may be required, always appeal. Maybe in some cases, when somebody is turned down the first time, they just take it at face value and leave it at that. So it's very, very important to appeal.
21 days, is that?
The 21 days is kind of the standard.
Okay, from when they receive the letter.
From when they receive the letter. But it's just so important to appeal. And I'm not sure of the success rate on appeal, but I know it's quite high. And when you do appeal, to submit additional information as well. something could have been left out in the first application. It's very, very important. The other thing I just want to mention in regard to disability laws before I move on to your second question, if somebody is working and they're also in receipt of disability allowance, as I mentioned, it's a very flexible payment. But since 2018, and as part of a government policy called Make Work Pay, a person can earn 427 per week. That's €427 per week, and retain their medical card. So it's very important to be aware of that. Now, when I mention combined income, what I'm referring to there is the salary they're earning and also their reduced disability allowance. So those two payments together, reduced disability allowance and salary, their combined income, as long as it doesn't exceed 427, they've absolutely no concerns whatsoever in regard to the medical card. Okay. The other thing I just want to say in regard to the medical card, and this goes right across the board for all social welfare payments. If you've been in receipt of a social welfare payment for 12 months or more, and you get a job tomorrow, you retain your medical card for 3 years. Okay, so that's right across the board. Once you're in receipt of a social welfare payment for 12 months plus, and you gain employment, you're starting tomorrow, you retain your medical card for 3 years. Now, in 3 years' time, you may not necessarily lose it, depending on how much you're earning. You may qualify for a GP card. Depending on your medical condition, you may qualify for a medical card based on medical grounds. So it's not always a case that you're going to lose your medical card either. Okay, so just to mention that. Just in regard to the advocate service, the role of the Department of Social Protection is to, I suppose, help. It's the responsibility of the Department of Social Protection to help a job seeker with a disability find employment, and they do this through the support of a job coach. Now, if somebody isn't job ready, then the Department of Social Protection can help somebody become job ready through a training or employment program. And when a job seeker is referred to employability, the employability service, we meet that person every week, and they'll help them find a job, be it full-time or part-time. Now, in regard to the advocacy service, I know that there are advocacy services around Cork City and County. I suppose I'm more in tune with what's available in Cork City and County.
Employability, is it?
The employability are funded by Intrio and funded by the Department of Social Protection, and they're specific to finding employment. But there's aspect that are out there. Now, they're specifically for somebody with a diagnosis of Asperger's and so on. But there are HSE funded advocacy services that are there.
Ability to work.
Ability to work is another one. So there are a couple. And what I would suggest is that if somebody is a wheelchair user, for example, contact the Irish Wheelchair Association. And if somebody contact the specific disability organisation that pertains to yourself.
Sure, yeah.
And that could be a very good starting point. Okay. So,
Great. 5 minutes if you have more, and
okay.
if not, we'll wrap up.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else there that might be of relevance.
You might just go through, if you wouldn't mind, the whole disregard again, just
Yes,
for clarity.
Okay, absolutely. Just in regard to the disability, the DA earnings disregard, and to keep the figures simple, it's very important. The standard disability allowance payment is $232. Okay, if somebody earns 165, it doesn't affect their disability allowance at all. 165, everything is perfect. It doesn't affect any other benefits, medical card, free travel, and so on. If somebody earns 265, I want to keep the figure simple.
With the 165, then would they be able to add that to their disability allowance?
Oh, of course,
Okay, yeah.
absolutely. They retain 100% of the DA.
Yeah.
So if they then earn 265, okay, again the first 165 is disregarded, and they're €100 over the limit.
Mm-hmm.
So half of €100 is 50.
Mm-hmm.
So the DA is reduced by €50. So if they're in receipt of 232, they're minus 50, their DA comes down to 182. Now that's only a guide, because if the employee is paying PRSI, that's also taken into consideration, and that won't be reduced. Okay, so that €50 is just a guide. I'll give you one other example. If somebody earns $375, the same formula is used all the way to $375. So again, the first $165 of your wages is disregarded. $165 from $375 leaves you with $210. You're $210 over the limit. Half of $210 is $105. $105 subtracted from $232 brings you down to $127. Okay, and again, that's only a guide, because if there's PRSI being paid, and it will be paid, that won't be deducted. Okay, so you can effectively be earning $375 in your salary, and your DA comes down to about $127 and a bit more. Okay, and just leaving a bit of room there for a bit of wiggle room there.
So you can add the 127 then to the 375.
You certainly can. Yeah,
So that'd be, yeah.
that's it. Now, as long as you don't exceed 427, when those two figures are added together, you know, your reduced DA and your wages, as long as you don't exceed 427, you have absolutely no worries about your medical card. But if you exceed 427, after 3 years, you may lose your medical card. Now again, you may, it all depends on how much you're earning, it depends on your medical condition. You may retain your medical card based on medical grounds, and may
just,
also based
sorry,
on a
Ryan,
GP
just in
card.
terms of you reaching the threshold then of, you said around 500, maybe
Yeah.
480, where
Yeah,
you won't
yeah.
get any more
Really?
disability allowance.
Yes.
Do you lose your entitlement then to the disability allowance? Like, let's say your job, you lose your job after 6 months.
Okay.
Can you
Okay.
reactivate your
Okay.
disability allowance?
Colin, thank
How
you.
do you
Yeah.
lose your disability allowance?
Yeah, Colin, thank you for asking that, because it's very important. If you're in a job for 11 months,
Right.
and your disability allowance has been, you're
You're
earning
not
so much,
using it, yes.
you're not using it because your disability allowance has reduced so much, it's gone. If after 11 months and 30 days your job is gone, your disability allowance will be automatically 100% reinstated. Okay? Now, an issue will come if you're over 12 months and maybe 2 years or 3 years in the job, and you've been earning so much that your disability allowance is gone. You've been on a €600 or €700 per week. Your disability allowance is gone. At that point, you're back to application stage. Okay? But again, I wouldn't be overly concerned about that, because if you've got a genuine disability, you'll get it back on the basis of your disability. Because, you know, when you get your disability allowance on day one, you're getting that disability allowance based on medical documentation. It's not based on somebody working in administration making a decision. It's based on medical documentation. And if your medical condition is exactly the same as it was when you applied for it 10 years ago, you will receive that DA back again. You know, I know there's fear around that, but it's based on medical documentation. And again, just to reassure people, if within that 12-month period the job doesn't work out, it's in writing on the government website that your disability allowance and other payments as well, like invalidity pension, will automatically be reinstated within the 12-month period.
If people want more information, where would you recommend them first?
Okay, well, I suppose first and foremost, everything is on the gov.ie website. So, for example, if you go to www.gov.ie/disability allowance, all the information is there. If you're looking for information on WPEP, www.gov.ie/WPEP, gov.ie/invalidity pension. It's all there on gov.ie.
If somebody wanted to speak with somebody,
Okay, I would say go to your local entry office. I'm happy to speak to somebody in Cork City. I'm based in the entry office in Cork City. If you're based in Ennis, County Clare, if you're based in Limerick, if you go to your local Intrio office.
So is the Intrio on Sullivan Ski?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
social welfare office.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And just to clarify what Intrio is, you know, we work for the Department of Social Protection, and Intrio is the one-stop shop in the street
Yeah.
for your social welfare payment, or if you're looking for a job, or if you're applying for a grant. So if you wanted information on any of the information here today, your local entry office can give you the information and point you in the right direction. So again, thank you all for the invitation today, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you the information.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just on behalf of everybody that would benefit from this information, on behalf of everyone that would benefit from this information, Dermot, we'd like to thank you for coming in and sharing it so skillfully and so knowledgeably.
Fantastic.
And it's a real resource, and the fact that we have it recorded is a gift, and I'm sure many people will benefit from it. And yeah,
Aidan, thank you for that. I suppose the one thing I would say is every time there's a budget, there's usually a budget in October, there can be tweaks and changes to this information, obviously increases in social welfare. But I suppose right now as we speak, the information is valid. But you know, at any point if you call to your local Intrio office, they can give you any updates or changes.
today's date being the 10th of April 2024.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you, Aidan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.